it's fascinating to me that we talk about culture change taking 3 to 5 years, yet the average tenure of a CEO is around 4 years. So the CEOs haven't even been able to make the change before they're moving on, and someone else is coming in and trying to shift things.
Welcome to the Leadership Performance Podcast, where you'll learn what makes leaders truly high-performing from leaders and their coaches. Beth, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to jump on and share some of your experiences on the Leader Experience Podcast. It's great to have you.
Thanks, Paul. Great to be here.
Now, just before we get started, so just to keep the folks online up with what we're talking about, what is it that you do in your professional life?
I'm a culture specialist. I work with organizations to help them understand what's happening at a systemic level within their businesses. So I'm a HR practitioner that also has my master's in org psych. So I'm looking at it from a behavioral, what's happening in the norms across your business, as well as what's happening in your systems and HR practices and processes that might be enabling some of those things. So a real mix across employee experience, but at a systemic level.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Right in our wheelhouse. That's awesome. Now, when you were 12, right, and someone said to you, what are you going to be when you grow up? I don't think that was your answer. So can you share with me, what was your answer back then? And how did you find yourself here doing this?
My answer was to be a social worker. But then I realized as I got older that I would be taking those problems home with me because I wouldn't be able to disconnect from what I was observing and what I'd seen. So how I got here is I emigrated to Australia 17 years ago, and I was a retailer back in the UK. I just fell into it straight, working part-time job at school, and then just fell into it, just liked the money basically. But when I moved to Australia, the sun was shining during retail peak, and there was no way that I was missing out on the sunshine being a Brit abroad. So I kind of did a bit of a list of reds and greens. Like reds were all the things that I didn't like about my career. Greens were all the things I did. And what fell out of that, because I had no mortgage, because it was a fresh start, what fell out of that was I loved supporting people's careers. I loved enabling people and unlocking their potential. So I started my own training business when I first got here. And then the extension of that was picking up performance, picking up well-being, started to do my psych undergrads, got an interest in why people are the way they are, and started to look at it at a systems level as well as an individual level. I'm really keen to understand how much does the leader drive the culture or the culture change the leader, and what is the interplay between the two. So just over the years, I've just kind of picked up all of those different experiences and capabilities to be able to do the work I do today.
Nice. And you kind of transitioned really from one form of interest in a person's journey and well-being through your social work through to a corporate version of something that has a lot in common with where you started. So yeah, very nice. I spent a lot of time in the same general world, and I haven't heard someone share anything of substance really around the way that the culture changes the leader. Can you share any experiences or research you've got on that lens?
When you're hired as a leader, you go into an organization and there's so much about the cultural norms that you are being inducted into, as well as bringing your own leadership experience and expectations. And it depends how charismatic, how dogmatic, how ego-driven a leader may be as to how much they try and change those cultural norms versus adopt those cultural norms. And it's fascinating to me that we talk about culture change taking 3 to 5 years, yet the average tenure of a CEO is around 4 years. So the CEOs haven't even been able to make the change before they're moving on, and someone else is coming in and trying to shift things. It depends where you sit in the hierarchy, and the power dynamic is how much influence you have to be able to reshape a culture. And as I mentioned, reshaping a culture takes time. So therefore, which of those practices and rituals and ways of working is that leader adopting? Because that's just the norm around here. I was talking to a guy who is an exceptional leader within the business he operated within, and he was hired into a new organization. And they were very focused on culture and leadership, and they'd kind of really articulated, this is our way of doing things. And in his probationary period, within the first month, they said, if you continue the way you are, you will not last here, because your way of working, your way of speaking to people, your expectations are just not aligned with our culture. And he'd never been called out on his performance. He'd never been challenged on the way he led. He was hired due to the high performing cultures that he had driven, but that high performing culture came at the cost of humanistic expectations around people. So there's quite a bit of research that's been done by human synergistics around the interplay between leadership and culture, with all of their various tools that they've developed around OCI and LSI that might be of interest for you to look at. But yeah, I'm always interested, is the environment driving this behavior, or is the leader driving the environment?
When you move down to an individual team, as opposed to the CEO of an organization, what's your narrative around, either an individual team or an individual, business unit that has several teams in it? Do you see a different time horizon and interplay there?
Yeah, so the subcultures definitely exist, and subcultures are not necessarily bad. I guess my challenge to businesses is always develop a culture by design, not by default. So if you don't deliberately look at culture the way you would look at your commercials, you're essentially saying, well, let's just leave that to chance. And therefore, let's leave each leader within their team to lead the way they want to lead. And there's this really challenge between how much do you empower, and empowerment is a bit of a buzzword for us at the moment, versus how much do you align? Because if you fully empower leaders, you are basically saying, whoever raised you and whoever rewarded you or punished you in the past for the way you lead, I'll just accept their view of the world, as opposed to looking towards alignment of what do we all agree on. And it's not just about the values on the wall, it's about, well, what behaviors sit underneath that, and then organizationally, what are we rewarding, what are we not accepting and calling people out on? Because then within those subcultures, there's some real clarity around experience. Because often when you go into businesses and talk to employees, it's very much who they work for as to how happy they are. We run engagement surveys and we slice and dice it in every which way as HR practitioners to kind of go, what's happening in these pockets of the business? But that's just talking about the current climate. That's just talking about the current happiness. It's not talking about the norms that have just been created over time and exist. So it would take a pretty powerful CEO to come in within their 4-year tenure and be able to change some of those subcultures that they might not be able to reach.
Yeah, exactly. The strongest impact on employee experience is the relationship with their immediate manager and the colleagues in their business, right? Very interesting thing to watch. You've had a great career, and you've had some moments in your career leading teams inside organizations. Can you think back of a time where you earned some leadership wisdom through your personal journey, and you realized that you'd been doing something, and if you just changed that one thing, you would have a much greater impact, and not undermine all the other amazing work you were doing? Because we all as leaders have this metaphorical thing in our tooth, right? Where we're unaware of this one little thing that we're doing. Have you had that moment? And you're like, oh, that was such a good thing to pick up.
Yeah. It sounds really simple, but I would always ask people what they think, not how they feel. And when I acknowledged that my behaviors were seeking people's cognitive ability and people's thinking rather than people's perceptions or feelings or emotions, I got a totally different response. So I just switched that one word, exact same sentence, exact same question. But rather than saying think, I started to say feel. And the richness of responses that I started to receive from my team, and also the barriers that broke down in terms of the relationship, it became so much less transactional of Beth's asking me for my thinking and my thoughts, and therefore those thoughts are either right or wrong based on the decision that's made off the back of me sharing, versus how I felt, and created this freedom and psychological safety to be able to just, it's not about right or wrong. It's about how do you feel and what is your perception. Just by changing that one word, it fundamentally changed not only their responses, but the relationships that grew because of it.
Very interesting. And so this is when you're delegating, or when you're asking for a person for their support or their opinion. And so just give me a little bit more context. It's a very interesting. I love those ones where you find, like you say, just that one word that has such a big impact. So I just would love to draw a little bit more out if I can.
Yeah. So it was off the back of me doing an emotional intelligence accreditation. And as part of the accreditation, I did a 360 on my EQ. And what it told me was I believed I was really emotionally aware. And so did my team, but they didn't see emotional expression. So my emotional expression, I thought, was high. I thought people knew exactly how I felt about things. But when the 360 came back, it turned out to be a blind spot whereby people didn't know, they couldn't read me. They didn't know how I felt. So my resilience was off the charts. My stress management was off the charts. So I was very good at being able to keep my cool,
Emotional regulation. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. My emotional regulation was great, but it wasn't just the regulation. I didn't need to regulate because I wasn't stressed. So I had this high resilience, high stress management because I would leave a meeting where something didn't go well for whatever reason. And I wouldn't take it personally because I detach myself. I don't think that I am my work. So I would then just solve that problem in my head. And by the time I reached my team, I didn't say, oh, that was a really hard meeting. I'd say, oh, just had a really productive meeting and we need to do blah, blah, blah. So it was like, there's nothing to see here type mentality, which actually wasn't the case. It's just, if they'd have caught me as I walked out of the meeting, they probably would have heard a lot more than when I got back to my desk. So that was the catalyst for the conversation. And I went to my team and said, help me understand, like you're saying, I'm not expressing my emotions. Like what would you want to see? What would you want to hear? What would that look like? And they didn't really know how to answer that question other than to say, we always know what you think, but we don't really know how you feel. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. So then I started to have a play with it to go, well, if I was to switch it out. So to answer your question, Paul, it was in everything. Like I wasn't ever using the term feel. I wasn't ever talking about feelings or perception. I was always coming from a place of thought. So it was in every interaction of how do you feel about today, or how do you feel about this project, or how do you feel about this decision we've just made, rather than, well, how did your day go? Well, what did you think about this? Or what did you think about that? It was just that subtle change that made a real difference.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, as humans, we all like to think that we're rational, especially in our decision making, but we're emotionally motivated beneath everything, even if it's at our subconscious level on any given moment. And so it's a really, really great lens to change and bring the connection piece rather than staying at logical cognition. Yeah, it's very interesting indeed. So through your time in both leadership and consulting, you help a lot of organizations create more effective leaders. Can you share with me, is there a particular thing that you've seen is a common thing that leaders struggle with, and you can give them that little nugget that helps change their trajectory?
I think in all its simplicity, I would just say ask, don't tell. I think as leaders, we've stopped being curious. We've stopped taking the time to collect the collective intelligence in the room because we're time poor, we've got a high cognitive load, we've got lots we need to execute, we're expected to know all the answers, and therefore often as leaders we're in this tell position, and we miss out on not only elevating the critical thinking of our teams, but also we miss out on some absolute gold of what other people are seeing and hearing across the business that could be a game changer. Because often as leaders, we're in meetings and we're so busy running from meeting to meeting, transacting with everyone to get stuff done, that if we actually just slowed down to speed up and just said, let's just ask, not tell, they'd be amazed what they found out from their people. And they'd be amazed how much better buy-in and ownership they would take in any task or project, because they feel like they're part of the solution, not the extension of arms and legs of a leader doing as they ask.
Yeah, it's a very good insight. It's one of those moments where that what you're talking about is compounded by people's assertiveness in our world about whether people are reflective and consider prior to speaking, or whether they're very willing and ready to jump in and offer their perspective. The thing you're talking about there a sage piece of advice for leaders. And then it's the extension, I think, is to get awareness about which people take their time to reflect and consider prior to speaking, because they're often the ones that don't share because they don't get the airtime. But they're the ones that have had have taken the time and naturally more reflective and are more considered, and that's where the gold often is. Do you have any sharing around any of that style of concept for how to make sure that you're giving those reflective people the opportunity to give you their gold?
Mhm. Yeah, look, I think we have built our organizations around an extroverted world. And often I would imagine, I've not run the numbers, but a lot of our leaders would be extroverts because we create meetings, brainstorming sessions that expect you to shoot from the hip because there's no pre-read, there's no agenda, there's no opportunity for people that are more introverted to be able to reflect. And introverts don't want to give a draft answer, they want to give a considered response as opposed to shoot from the hip. And that's totally fine and should be rewarded, to your point, Paul. So I think my advice would be give people a heads up. Give people a heads up of what is the agenda, what is the meeting covering, so people can actually have an opportunity to think. Then I wouldn't be calling them out by name because you're putting them on the spot. And if they do have a draft answer, then it might not be the time that they want to share. So I'll often say, okay, everyone, let's just do some reflective practice, take 5 minutes. This is the problem we're trying to solve for. And I'll get them to use Post-it notes, and they'll write down their responses on Post-it notes, and then they'll put them all on a wall. And it's like, okay, this is now everyone's collective thinking on the wall. Now let's work through this. Oh, we've got 8 people saying the same thing over here. This is a big problem. Let's lean into this. Like this, and if I've got a group of introverts, I'll spend the whole session on Post-it notes, and they will be so happy because they've got an opportunity to think through what they want to say and how they want to articulate it. So yeah, give people prior warning of what you want them to talk about. Don't just make it all a talk fest, because then you are going to get the extroverts taking over. And try and find opportunities for them to be able to your point, Paul, they're listening. They're great listeners. So they're listening to it all play out, and they're hearing us all say the same thing in a different way over and over. And they've already got to the answer, and they could have finished the meeting 5 minutes in, and we're sitting there at, 55 minutes in, and things that still aren't resolved. So know your people, and know who's that one that can just drop the truth bomb at the right time where we actually start to solve for the real problem.
Love that. Have you heard the way Jeff Bezos solves for this? He's got the whole thing about silent time or reading time or whatever it's called at the start of the meetings. Everybody sits there and reads the memo, and there's no rush. Take it in, process it, have reflection. Now let's actually get in rather than have all those behaviors you said. I think your idea and your approach using the Post-it notes, I think that's brilliant. It changes the communication modality, right? So people can have that time to reflect and get their ideas down and process it, and then it creates the format for constructive, structured discussion as well, which both those things will get you a much better outcome. I think that's awesome. Nicely done. I know we're on a relatively tight agenda, so before I've got one last question. I'm going to take you down. Before I do, is there anything that you would like to share or anything that's on your mind?
I wonder how Jeff Bezos goes now that AI is here and how considered those memos actually are. The thing that I'm currently playing with is, what is that human AI integration? How is that changing the design of our organizations? How is that changing, have we got bots talking to bots right now with, I'm going to get an email, I'm going to feed it into whatever my language model of choice is to then feed it back to you, and how often are you actually receiving it? So I think what's on my mind is what do we need to do in our organizations and our leadership to really leverage and embrace AI for all of the greatness it can give us, but not lose that human connection? And where's our focus on human capability around critical thinking and judgment and empathy, and how are we dialing that up as AI starts to take more of our process, lower level stuff? So I think we're going to see a shift in the way we need to lead and the expectations of us as leaders.
Yeah, 100%. If you have a keen interest in that, we should have another conversation. I'll show you we've got AI that gives leaders emotional intelligence to get conversations right with each person. Worked with someone the other day, and his father's the founder of the company. He's flying in from overseas, and we're chatting, and we're like, how do we want to approach this with your dad? And we had just shown how well the AI understands him personally, and he's like, well, ask the AI. As in, it knows my dad better than I do, like kind of thing. It's wild as well. Now, I've got to ask you one last question. Now, you're allowed to take this through a personal Beth lens, your business lens, or the world at large. So, pick however you'd like to approach the question. But it's a very simple one. Looking into your crystal ball, what does the next 12 months hold?
I think the next 12 months is going to be this interplay between AI, the ethics around it. I was talking to a guy the other day, and he was saying his child 15 years ago started to use social media, and it's only now 15 years later we're actually locking it down at a legislative level to say it's not good for kids. And we've jumped on pretty quickly that AI might not be the best thing for us, and we've jumped on pretty quickly around the ethics and governance that sit around it, and we've got varying degrees of adoption, both individual and at an organizational level. And I think in the next 12 months, we're going to start to move out of that early adopters emerging to us now actually start looking at it at a systems level and going, okay, how is this working within our organizations? How are humans and agents working together? Have we got the right agents doing the right thing? Do we actually need an agent that is checking on the other agents to make sure what they're saying and what they're doing is correct? So I think the next 12 months, we're going to be integration of human and agent, and how do leaders lead agents and humans? I'm hoping agents aren't going to be able to ask for, annual leave and all of the rest of the entitlements.
Complain about the coffee machine or something, and
yeah. And I think we're going to move to looking at capability at a team level, not on an individual level, because of that. So AI is going to level the playing field somewhat and bring some equity in for people that haven't had an opportunity to learn, which is great. But then equally, AI can be used to mask that lack of capability too. So therefore, I think we're going to start looking at capability at a team level, not at an individual level, in order to solve problems with humans and AI.
And it's a very interesting lens. You're just making me reflect at the same time. There's probably, which I haven't heard anyone talk about, but you just made me think about this, that there's a likely opportunity that neurodivergence becomes a superpower. Because all of our things that we have in common are easily done now,
Yeah.
Very interesting indeed. Listen, this has been great. I know you've got time commitments coming up in just a few minutes. So I just want to say thank you so much. It's been really, really lovely to have a chat. You've shared lots of great gold, some reflections and insights, and some data-led stuff. So it's awesome. Thank you. And have yourself an awesome day.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Paul. Great to meet you.
Likewise. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon.
See ya.
Ciao.